Under a sheet of solid ice, a woman's shoulder still shows blue ink after 2,500 years. It is a deer, but not a normal deer. Its antlers end in the heads of griffins, and its nose curls into a bird's beak. This tattoo sat on frozen skin, hidden in a block of ice, inside a burial mound on a high, cold plateau called Ukok in the Altai Mountains of Siberia. When scientists found her in 1993, her skin, her hair, and her tattoos were still there, soft enough to read like a page. 6 horses lay buried beside her, saddled and ready, as if she planned to ride somewhere far away. Nobody has ever agreed on where. The dig happened in the summer of 1993, high on the Ukok Plateau, close to where Russia, China, Kazakhstan, and Mongolia almost touch. A team led by archaeologist Natalia Polosmak was digging into a burial mound called a kurgan, built by a people called the Pazyryk about 2,500 years ago. Most kurgans like this had already been robbed centuries ago. This one looked robbed too, at first. Then the diggers hit solid ice, a frozen block that had formed inside the burial chamber and never melted. They had to pour hot water, cup by cup, just to loosen it. Days later, a wooden coffin appeared inside the ice, sealed shut, untouched since the day it was buried. Inside the coffin lay a single hollowed log of larch wood, cut from one tree and lined with black felt. The woman inside was unusually tall for her time, close to 1.65 meters. Her body had been prepared for burial with skill, packed with peat and bark to slow decay before the ice took over. Beside her skull, archaeologists found the remains of a tall headdress, built up with felt and wood, and once covered in gold foil that had long since flaked away. Whoever she was, someone had spent real time preparing her for whatever came after death. She was maybe 25 years old when she died. Nobody buried like this by accident. Outside her wooden coffin, in a separate part of the mound, lay 6 horses. They were not thrown in carelessly. Each one wore a bridle, and most wore a saddle, some decorated with carved wood and felt shaped into animals fighting each other. The horses had been killed and arranged with care, laid on their sides as if resting. Among the Pazyryk people, horses like this usually marked the graves of important men, warriors and leaders who needed mounts for a long journey after death. A woman with 6 horses was unusual. Some archaeologists think the horses mark her as a person of high standing. Others are not so sure standing is the right word at all. Most Pazyryk graves nearby had already lost their gold long before archaeologists arrived. Ancient robbers, sometimes working within a generation of the burial, dug straight down through the stones, pulled out anything bright, and left the bodies disturbed. Entire tombs across the Altai region were opened this way. Their gold melted down or sold. Their owners' names lost along with the metal. The Ukok grave should have gone the same way. The mound above it looked disturbed, like every other one nearby. But whoever dug into it stopped short. They never reached the coffin. What separated one untouched Bronze Age grave from 100 empty ones was not luck of location. After the burial, water seeped down into the stone chamber, maybe from melting snow or a wet season. In most places, that water would have drained away. But this grave sat on ground that stayed frozen most of the year, called permafrost. The water froze solid before it could escape, and it never fully thawed again. Season after season, the ice grew thicker, sealing the coffin, the horses, and everything inside, like a natural freezer that ran for 2,500 years. Ancient robbers digging down through frozen stone in a hurry likely gave up before they broke through. The same ice that seemed to work against them ended up saving everything for archaeologists ages later. The tattoo on her shoulder was only the beginning. Later, scientists used infrared cameras to check her skin for ink too faded to see with the naked eye. They found more animals hidden across both arms. A deer with a griffin's beak stretching from shoulder to wrist. A ram, a leopard-like creature twisting back on itself. Similar animal tattoos have shown up on Pazyryk men found nearby, so this was not just decoration for women. Some researchers think the ink marked rank, or clan, or a spiritual protection carried into the next world. Nobody living today can read the tattoos the way her people once could. The meaning traveled with her, and it did not survive the trip. Next to her body, archaeologists found a small container holding coriander seeds, along with a stone dish and traces of what may have been cannabis. Coriander did not grow naturally that far north in Siberia, so it had to travel a long distance to reach her, likely brought along trade routes stretching toward Persia or Central Asia. Whether the seeds were medicine, food for the afterlife, or part of a ritual is still debated. What is clear is that whoever packed her grave reached far beyond the plateau to fill it. She was buried with things from a wider world, at a time when most people never traveled more than a few days from where they were born. Modern scans of her body turned up signs of illness. Some researchers point to evidence that could suggest breast cancer, though this reading is disputed among specialists who have studied the same scans. Others note an injury to her skull that may have come from a fall, possibly from a horse, sometime before death. It is possible more than one thing was wrong with her at once. 2,500 years later, with no records and only a preserved body to study, doctors cannot say for certain which problem killed her, or whether it was several problems together. Even her cause of death remains an open question, argued over in papers instead of settled by one clear answer. When scientists tested her DNA, they were looking for a direct line to people living in the Altai region today. What they found was more mixed than expected. Genetic markers connecting her to both European and North Asian populations, not neatly matching any single modern group. For some in the Altai Republic, who had already come to see her as an ancestor, this was unwelcome news. Others pointed out that ancient identity was never going to map cleanly onto today's ethnic lines anyway. The science answered one question and immediately raised three more about who her people actually were, and who, if anyone alive today, has the strongest claim to call her their own. In the Altai Republic, many people were angry that she had been taken away at all. Local tradition already spoke of a guardian spirit watching over the gate to the underworld, a figure some elders connected to the exact place she was found. To them, digging her up was not just archaeology, it was disturbing a guardian who was never meant to leave. When a serious earthquake hit the region in 2003, some local residents said plainly that it was her anger. Scientists pointed to normal seismic activity along a known fault line instead. Both explanations were offered publicly, and neither side changed the other's mind. The argument over what her disturbed rest had caused was never resolved. After years of argument and petitions, her body was returned to the Altai Republic in 2012. She now rests in a museum in Gorno-Altaisk, inside a special glass case built to hold her at the same cold, damp conditions as the permafrost that preserved her for so long. Refrigeration units run constantly to keep the temperature steady. Visitors can view her only rarely, and only under strict rules, since her tissue is fragile after 25 centuries of frozen stillness, followed by decades of study and travel between laboratories. The mound on the plateau where she was found is empty now, marked but empty. The horses and coffin gone to museum storage, far from Ukok. Through every stage of this story, one image keeps returning. That first tattoo. The deer with a griffin's beak reaching up her shoulder. It was there in the ice block before anyone knew her name. It was there under infrared light, revealing cousins hidden on her arms. It was there in the arguments about status, about rank, about whether a woman with no gold could still be someone important. The animal itself is not real, and never was. Griffins do not exist, and deer do not carry bird heads on their antlers. Yet this creature, invented by someone 2,500 years ago, has outlasted her name, her language, and everyone who once knew exactly what it meant. So who was she? Some archaeologists argue she was a priestess or healer, pointing to the coriander, the cannabis traces, and the care taken with her burial. Others suggest she may have been a kaichi, a kind of storyteller and singer, whose performances were treated as sacred among steppe cultures, which could explain honor without gold or weapons. Still others caution against assuming any special role at all, noting that burial customs on the Ukok Plateau are not fully understood, and that 6 horses might have meant something closer to family wealth than personal power. Every explanation fits some of the evidence, and none of them fits all of it. The debate has not moved in 30 years. Under the museum lights in Gorno-Altaisk, behind refrigerated glass, her shoulder still faces the room at the same angle it faced the ice block back in 1993. The griffin-beaked deer tattoo is still visible, blue lines against skin that by every normal rule should have crumbled to dust centuries ago. Conservators check the case temperature every day, because a few degrees of drift could undo what 2,500 years of frozen ground did for free. The 6 horses that once stood ready outside her coffin are gone now, kept separately in storage, their saddles catalogued and boxed. Only she remains on display, still wearing the ink nobody can fully translate, on a body whose real name nobody will ever know. More forgotten history every week. Subscribe so it isn't lost twice.